It is time once again, my child, for you to show the world your kindness. You have saved our people. You have restored our land. But now you must save another people, another land. It is not the place you call home, but you will find comfort. You may lose the ones you love, but you will find them once more. Shadows will be among you. It is the purpose of the spirits to live, to save, to protect, to restore. You will run, you will glide, you will fight, you will grieve. You will be their guardian. You have grown much in your time in Nihilel, but you will grow much more in this land. Your destiny is no longer in the hands of my will. It is now the will of the Wisps. Some call you hope, some call you Savior, but I call my child Ori.
Ori. Every time I see this game, I get a smile on my face. I hope it's not hard to see why. But in case you don't understand, I'll tell you about it. Ori and the Will of the Wisps started development immediately after Blind Forest. It's not hard to see why. Blind Forest was a massive commercial success, but the people at Moon Studios knew the fans wanted more. A common thing brought up was the fact that Blind Forest could be beaten very quickly if you weren't trying to get any collectibles in the game. So people who weren't collectible happy just played the main game and indeed enjoyed their time, but it left them wanting more. The lead developer, Thomas Mahler, said that the idea for Will of the Wisps should be to Blind Forest what Super Mario 3 was to the original Super Mario Bros., trying to make it way more expansive, more to do, and a larger emphasis on exploration. They wanted to make it more enjoyable to backtrack and just make it an all-out step forward as a sequel. Luckily, Moon Studios got the people to do it. Their small team of 20 grew to a team of 80, with an artist from Blizzard Entertainment joining the crew just by how impressive the game was. And let me tell you, the art team has done a hell of a job. And as you can see, the game did really freaking well. But why is that? Well, the only way to go for Ori was up. The team added features they wanted to add from Blind Forest, brought back old abilities, new combat system, but most importantly, it still felt like Ori. On top of that, this game can be played by anyone. It still portrays a great story, but you don't need to know the story of the previous game to enjoy it and understand what's going on. So, why don't we talk about that story a bit? I'm gonna mention right here, the game's ending will be spoiled. Not at this exact moment, I'm just gonna go over the general beginning of the story. Our story starts right where the first game left off. I personally love it when games do this, so it feels like everything seamlessly connects. But don't worry, you could start the story here and understand what's happening in the game. Anyhow, Koro's egg that Ori, Gumo, and Naru had been taking care of finally starts to hatch, and out comes little Ku. I would die for Ku. Ku is instantly treated like family and like a little sister to Ori. Similarly to the first game, we get these wondrously adorable time progressions of the four growing up. The family try to teach Ku how to fly, but she unfortunately has an issue with one of her wings. It prevents Ku from staying in the air, and it tears her up. She feels saddened by the fact that she's flightless. Ori remembers something that could help her adopted sister, Kwoloks feather, her final gift to her child. Gumo, being a very intelligent creature, makes a makeshift wing for Ku, and it works perfectly. Ku can finally give flight, and we get probably one of the single prettiest cinematics I've ever seen. But this is an Ori game, and all things bad happen with a storm. Ori and Ku flew too far from Nibel, and are separated after Kwoloks feather flies off from Ku. They are lost, torn away from each other on this distant land called Nywin. It quickly is made apparent that this land has fallen into hostility. Ori lands in the Inkwater Marsh, while Ku is lost in the Silent Woods, the place where the owls are no more. Ori must find her way back to her sister at all cost. She runs into various creatures called Moki that tell her that an ancient guardian might know Ku's whereabouts. So trek on Ori does, to the great guardian Kwolok, a ginormous frog who really feels like a father figure almost. He's the protector of the marsh and the Mokis. He tells Ori why this world seems so hostile. The spirit tree that kept up with Nywin had been wilting. It had outlasted its life, and the Wisps have dispersed. This is different from the first game because it was the elements that got shattered and dispersed across the land, but the actual spirit of the tree had died out. Therefore, it had started a great corruption, turning the normal creatures into dangerous beasts, creating foul monsters, and even tearing away a few of the guardians of the land, such as the Howler. The land had quickly began to decay. Terrible storms, poisonous waters, and terrifying enemies. A few Moki had spotted Ku in the Silent Woods, the place where the corruption had taken its biggest toll. The only way to get there was to revitalize the wellspring and cause the pure waters to flow again. Kwolok gives Ori one of the remaining wisps after the corruption, the voice of the forest. Once at the wellspring, you'll see it as an absolute towering beast of a water tower that Ori must get through and free from the foul presence. Once the waters had been restored, Ori goes out in search for her lost sister in the Silent Woods. This area seems to be the most hostile in the land. Dark and gray, with skeletal remains of owls and creatures turned to stone. The dead wasteland is guarded by a terrifying creature named Shriek. If you thought Koro was intimidating, this one is way worse. Her presence fills you with anxiety, and her strange way of moving is just so unsettling. Eventually, Ori does find Ku. Once again united, they try their best to navigate through the decrepit woods. Unfortunately, though, Shriek found them and killed Ku. Koro was redeemable. Shriek is now entered unredeemable. Not after this. Ku is laid to rest, but hope remains. The voice of the forest tries their best to revitalize Ku, but lacks the strength to do it. Kwolok tells Ori that there's a possible way to restore the land and save Ku. She must find the broken wisp and bring them back to the Spirit Willow. Now Ori ventures out again to be their savior, not only to this land's people, but to her loved ones. Alright, it's that time. Time for me to absolutely praise this game for every single ounce of a masterpiece that it is. Like, the first game was a masterpiece in itself, but man, this one was even more. As people's reviews put it, it was a universally acclaimed masterpiece. Well, I don't know throughout all the universe, but you know what, might as well be. It might feel like I repeated some things here from the last game, but I have to talk about them. Up first again is the art design. My god. It changed, but feels familiar in the best way possible. Twice the amount of color, twice the amount of detail. Every place looks exactly how you would expect it, but with major beauty changes to them. The ex-Blizzard art designer, Jeremy Gritton, made a big shift by making all of the major character art into three-dimensional models and played them in a multi-layered backgrounds to make them look seamlessly integrated. Which in turn made the cinematics look even more breathtaking than the first game. Each movement and animation in this game looks artistically incredible and fluent as well. Second up is the combat in this game, which they fixed my one issue with it in the previous game. Ori is the one in charge of the damage. Her capabilities and power are front and center with many ways of doing combat. You start out with a decently ranged, fast-attacking Spirit Blade, but later on you get a projectile-based bow for long-range targeting. There are also various other combat-based abilities you can learn from Ophir, who is a spirit art specialist. He can teach you a Spirit Hammer style, which is a lot slower, but it's still my favorite because it just packs a meaty punch. Throwing stars, spears, blazes, you name it. Each are incredibly stylized and creative. Some people criticize the combat because it felt heavily inspired by Hollow Knight's combat. Sure, you can make that argument, but man, it helped this game out tremendously because of another favorite thing in this game: boss fights. Each of these boss fights are worth it just based on the themes alone. Take a listen to them. Now, some are easy fights, while some are very hard depending on your difficulty. I played on easy because I wanted to get the footage as soon as possible, but I have beat the game on normal, and I am playing through on hard as of now. But even on easy, these bosses can still insta-kill you if you mess up at the escape sequences, which some of these are so dang good. The Sandworm is my favorite one. He's kind of a boss, but he only shows up for 2 minutes of the game and you don't even fight him. You just run. But they gave him the most freaking Dark Souls boss theme I've ever heard. Another thing pointed out was that this was probably added due to Hollow Knight's popularity, which again is possible, but all these fights feel very well developed. Plus, Ori did have many boss fights in the first game, and since the developers said that they wanted to make this game feel like a massive step forward, it's fair to think that they probably thought about boss fights before the fact Hollow Knight became popular. Plus, one of the usual best things about Metroidvania games is the boss fights, which Ori lacked in the previous game because they wanted to focus more on narrative due to a lack of assets and time. Fourth up on my favorites is the music once again. It feels as if Will-o'-the-Wisp music could fit in Blind Forest, but Blind Forest couldn't fit in Will-o'-the-Wisp. Blind Forest was more focused on a story and a narrative, so they want a more cinematic feel to it. Well, even though Will-o'-the-Wisp has some really cinematic-worthy music, is more based on exploratory and floaty sounds to it. Each piece of area-specific music adds so much more depth to it. Here are a few songs that were my favorite. Once again, a beautiful masterpiece of music I will still listen to this day. Fifth up is the absolutely wonderful and wholesome NPCs in this game. Most of them are Mokis, which are adorable in their own right, but some are Grom, a big four-armed creature that just wants to build a safe haven for the people of Nightwind. Or he can find Gorlick ore to help build it into a wondrous home for a large amount of people, such as Tule, the gardener beaver. Ori can find mysterious seeds that can be planted around the safe haven to make it feel even more beautiful and give Ori access to other parts of it. Talk, a strange bird traveler who's always up for exploring something, and Lupo, who you'll find in various parts of the map. He charts maps for each area so Ori can see all the branching paths. Then there are various Mogis there, each with their own stories and characteristics. A lot of them have little side quests for you to go on as well. Number 6 on my favorite things of this game is the collectibles and upgrades. The first game kinda only had 4 collectibles: spirit cells, energy cells, life cells, and ancestor tree powers. Will the Wisp says, that's cute, and gives us all of that in these new shards in the game. They can improve things like damage, give buffs to health and energy, add new things to abilities, or outright make the abilities better, and it can help you round Ori to be the perfect guardian. You can replace each shard at any time. A spirit shard specialist named Twillin can offer you upgrades to your shards, or just being able to purchase different shards. There are also Kwoloks ores, spirit races that allow you to gain a lot of spirit cells, and slot upgrades allowing you to hold more shards, which you can get from completing combat shrines. The life and energy cells have been split up into halves, so there's a lot more incentive to go explore the area. Last one on my favorite things is the abilities. A lot of returning abilities from the first game, such as Bash, Dashing, and Light Burst. I would have been really sad if Bash didn't make a return. It's such an incredibly fun and satisfying ability to use. New abilities include Spirit Edge, Spirit Arc, Regenerate, Flash, Swim Dash, Burrow, Grapple, and Launch. Each feel great to use and open the world in movement and combat capabilities. There are also a ton of different combat abilities to choose from. I loved all of these new abilities except one, but I'll talk about that in the next part. This is the hardest part about the review for me. I feel that with a review, you should at least point out any flaws and not ignore them. Which made it really hard because there isn't too many flaws with the game. Okay, there are a couple, but it's very minor stuff again. Except for one thing, it's kind of a major flaw, so I'll talk about it first. Clipping. It occurs really rarely in the game, but there are very tiny holes in the terrain you can, in fact, phase into and get soft locked if you don't have the warp ability. So you either have to load an old save or warp to a location. Very rarely did this happen, and most of the times it was really funny. But it was an issue that frankly probably can't be fixed. The scale of the map is massive, and to go through and test every part of it just to fix it, it doesn't seem to make any sense. Especially since it's not game-breaking. Secondly, I'm not a fan of one-and-done things. That's why I don't get the existence of Flash. It was the ability you get to keep yourself out of the darkness in a specific area. But then after you beat that area, it gets lit up. So you don't need Flash anymore. Unless you're getting this dude's acorn from the cave, but other than that, the only use it has is to do chip damage to enemies. Which there are like 10 other abilities that are better at doing that. Like Blaze that does burst damage and chip damage. I just think if you're gonna have an ability like that, it should have more use outside of those 2 instances in a niche combat thing. And I'm gonna be real honest with you, those were the only things I had an issue with. This game is on the verge of being perfect, but has these few little blemishes that keep it back. If any developers want to know how to do a sequel to their game, this is the perfect definition of one. Continuing with our story, Ori treks out on her search for the Wisp. The first place she ventures to is Bar's Reach. This place has been an eternal winter for too long. Its guardian, Bar, has given up hope for it. But Ori, in her determination, rescues the Wisp and shows that there just might be hope. I'd risk anything to hug Bar. The 2 Wisps then join into each other, and Ori ventures out again. Since the wellspring had been revitalized, Ori is now able to swim to the Luma pools. This game is one of the few games I enjoy water levels, but that might be because of the swim dash making it incredibly fun to get through. Through swimming and diving, Ori finds Kwolok again, who seems to have found the next wisp. Unfortunately, he had been taken control by the foul presence. It now becomes a life or death battle between Ori and Kwolok. This broke my heart after defeating him. He asks Ori to take care of the land and the Moki, and he fades out of this world. Here's an aspect I love about the soundtrack. All areas that were associated with Kwolok now feel sad, and none of them feels more heartbreaking than the empty throne room. This and Ku's death really leave an impact on how bad things have gotten in Nightwind. Getting the strength to move onward, Ori needs to go through the depths of Moldwood. Oh my god, did I hate this part. I'm not afraid of spiders or bugs, but Jesus Christ, did I feel nothing but uncomfortable in this area. It's the home of the Spider Guardians, so the entire area is made out of wrapped bugs and torn about bug body parts. Some things pulsate and make gross noises. Not to mention, you use bug legs as platforms. It's all super creepy, especially since it's completely dark too. If you stay in the darkness too long, you begin to hear voices, and the darkness will eventually consume you. At the end of this area, you save Mora from the corruption, and she gives you the other wisp. Lastly, Ori fights the sands of the windswept waste. Ori must sneak past Shriek because this is her feeding grounds. It's extremely tense, and I argue more tense than Koro's. Burrowing through the sands, Ori arrives at the wind-torn ruins, a temple of sorts built for the Wisp and those spirit guardians. This is where we get a lot of the lore behind the Wisp and the spirits. Spirits and Wisp are eternal, but not the bodies they host, i.e. the ancestor trees and the great spirit trees. The spirit willow that the Wisp once inhabited began to decay, which caused the land of Nightwind to turn to decay. The purpose of the Wisp and the spirit guardians is to keep the lands alive by becoming the spirit trees. New spirit trees. Finally, Ori retrieves the final Wisp. All 5 combine to become Seer. With the 5 Wisps together now, Ori now comes to the end. Willow's End. This is probably the best location in the game, just because it uses all the abilities and skills you learn throughout the game. It feels very appropriate that this is the last area. This is the point where I begin to spoil some more things. So if you want to avoid that, you want to skip to my final thoughts card if you see it. Alright, we good? Cool. This is the end. The land will be restored, and Ku will be saved, but Seer can no longer be Nightwind's guardian. Her time has passed. The Willow has died. She's not strong enough to carry the torch again. She tells Ori she must be the new guardian. It is the will of the Wisp. But before Ori could agree, Shriek attacks once more. Shriek's aggression doesn't have as much merit as Koro's did. Shriek was born without a family. She was rejected by the other owls and turned to the darkness for her comfort. Even though Ori showed her kindness, she rejected it still. So now Shriek is the only thing that stands in the way of you bringing Nightwind back to life. It's a tough battle, but she's defeated. She remains in darkness. She dies in darkness. Ori, with barely enough strength, fulfills her destiny. She bonds with Seer and becomes the next spirit tree. This ending hit me way harder than the first one. Not only did the cinematic hit you in the face with emotion, but this in turn means that Ori will no longer be the lead character in future games. The developers said that they are always open to make another game, but I don't see how they can put Ori's name on it anymore. I've fallen in love with this character, and I hope that in future games I can enjoy the next character just as much, but Ori will always have a special place in my heart. What else can I say about this game? But thank you. Thank you to Moon Studios for crafting one of the most breathtaking masterpieces I've ever seen. And thank you to Microsoft for giving your support to these developers. Not a single moment did I feel like I was not enjoying myself. Whether it was exploring, fighting, or crying my eyes out, I leave this game with a smile on my face every time. It's really hard for me to get into single-player games nowadays. I took a chance on this game, and I would never forgive myself if I didn't. Play the game for yourself, please. I guarantee you will at least like something about it. Goodbye, everyone, and have a great rest of your day.